Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Dark Ocean. I'm your host, PJ Williams, and I have a very special episode for you guys today. I was working on an episode for the 27 Club. That's the group of famous people, mostly musicians, who all died at the age of 27, and getting into what's going on behind that whole thing and the Faustian bargain. And while I was working on this, Nix from Stygian Charters reached out to me and asked me to come on her show. So I pitched the idea that we would do a crossover episode, a crossover between Dark Ocean and Stygian Charters. So we recorded this episode together. It's going to come out on Dark Ocean as well as on Stygian Charters. So please enjoy this episode. And if you like it, don't forget to look at the links in the description and also go follow Nix and her podcast. It's a wonderful podcast, and I was very happy to do this crossover with her. Now on to the show. Thanks for having me, Nix. I'm very excited to be doing this. So how are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm doing good. So I had first heard you on Conspiracy Pilled, which used to be a co-host on. And then I followed you on your other shows. And you just, you were one of the podcasts I listened to that I really felt was, loaded with information. And your research was always really well done. And, you're one of the inspirations as to why I started and, got fascinated in these topics.
That's honestly the two biggest compliments I hear. So thank you for that. Honestly, I don't even know what to say. But I don't know if it's just that I'm kind of like... I don't know if autistic is the right word when it comes to research, but I'm obsessive about it. So like when I get into a subject, I just keep digging. And I realize that sometimes my episodes run long because I'll have like 10 or 12 pages on something that most people cover in 20 minutes. So I don't know if that makes it good or not, but I just try to be thorough about it.
No, it does. So. I do the same thing because people will be like, well, do you want to cover this? And you're like, in a couple days. I'm like, a couple days? Like, right. I need more time than that. Like, so I need to check, different sources and verify, everything. So, but I'm the same way. It's like, I love to research and I go down rabbit holes and, it goes down one after the other. So
yeah, it's funny because I know that my output for social media is far less than most people, but I feel like once I get into a subject, I probably am shut off from the world for a couple of days, just like completely diving into the subject. And then, I get ready to present it and I'm like all excited because I've got, 20 pages of notes just to share with people. So I'm excited for this one. We talked about the 27 Club, which was something that I've wanted to cover for a long time. And I've brought it up recently on Real Conspiracies. I talked about, I say that, but it's a show that isn't even out till after this one will come out. But I'm recording a lot of episodes ahead of time, but I have been talking about it on Real Conspiracies. An episode coming up about called Odd Thomas, which has Anton Yelchin. Are you familiar with Anton Yelchin's work or his death or anything?
No. What's he do or what's some of his work? Maybe if you.
He was in Star Trek. He was in Thoroughbreds, Terminator, one of the Terminator movies. But he was an actor who died at the age of 27 under some really weird circumstances. And we'll circle back to him because I got stuff on him in my notes. But when we covered Odd Thomas, his death was a very important part of that episode, and it's weird. So. But usually the 27 Club is musicians. He's one of the few actors. There's a couple athletes that get included, but the vast majority of this list is musicians, and it's always kind of been a musician thing. And then the trend of noticing celebrities who've died at 27 has kind of gone backwards in time, and it's updated to include anyone. A lot of people bring up Heath Ledger, but he died at 28, just after turning 28, so he's not officially 27 Club, but still a weird death. So.
Yeah, there is one particular musician, I'm sure you'll touch on him, so I'm not going to give it away, that I think is interesting, that died at 27. So, and then there's a couple that died at 27 who had or knew a particular individual. So I'm interested to see if you touch on that too. So yeah, but before we get started though, how did you get started into this, researching and podcasting and these kind of topics?
Yeah, I've always really enjoyed kind of mysterious, interesting conspiracy cryptids, things like that. I think I grew up being fascinated with why can't I think of what it's called? I always want to call it Spooky Door because of Futurama, but that's a parody of it's a
paranormal, supernatural.
Oh my gosh, it's a parody of the Twilight Zone. There we go. I came around to it. I grew up listening to Twilight Zone stuff, radio versions of Twilight Zone with my uncle growing up.
Okay.
And I loved that. And then
nice.
I became a truck driver and I got into audiobooks and podcasts just as a way to pass the time. When you drive for 11 hours a day, it's kind of hard to just listen to music. So
I agree.
And I was a musician before that, so I loved music, but I started getting into audiobooks and podcasts. And this was around 2016, 2015 when I started driving. And I realized that there was a lot of podcasts I would listen to that I feel like were missing huge things or not exploring certain topics in ways that I would have or were raising questions and then not answering them. So it frustrated me, and I really wanted to get into this all the way back then. I had the idea to start conspiracy podcasting, back in 2016. I couldn't find the time. I couldn't find a co-host. I wasn't sure if I was even going to do it. And then by 2019, I got into Twitch streaming specifically to get used to talking in front of a camera. Because I've always, a lot of people probably don't know this about me. I hate being in front of a camera a lot. Like I still do. I don't enjoy it at all. But I like talking about this stuff. So I had to get over that fear. And then I started podcasting in late 2019. I had a show called Totally Plausible Conspiracy Theories. And I've just been kind of refining the stuff I talk about, the way that I do it, my research, and hopefully just getting better at it. Like I want to get to a point where I know enough things that I can kind of have a memory bank of stuff to draw on and make connections that other people aren't making because I've done my research. So I've been really deeply researching this stuff for at least 6 or 7 years now. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. So, all right. Well, I'm not going to take up any more time. Let's get to the 27 Club.
All right. Well, yeah. So the 27 Club, this started to first be noticed between 1969 and 1971. I think we already kind of hit on what it is. It's a list of celebrities who died at the age of 27. But between 1969 and 1971, you had Brian Jones, Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, Jim Morrison, and actually a couple others. But those are the big ones that people noticed all died in that 3-year span. They all died at the age of 27. So you have 4 absolute music legends dead within 3 years, all the exact same age. But according to this guy named Charles R. Cross, who is the biographer for Kurt Cobain, he said, quote, "It wasn't until Kurt Cobain took his own life in 1994 the idea of the 27 Club arrived in the popular zeitgeist." So this was talked about, but it wasn't what it became now. And obviously in the 90s, that's probably another inspiration for me. You had like Unsolved Mysteries, you had like Forensic Files. You had all those like mysterious, cool TV shows that came out. And obviously the rise of the internet after that. Sorry.
My mom had those, I think they were Time Life books or whatever. So there's like it was like a bunch of different volumes of like kind of spooky, unexplained stuff. I remember looking at those as a kid and getting creeped out by those, but at the same time being fascinated.
I've always been a night owl. I could never sleep as a kid. I've been insomniac my whole life. So as a kid, I would not be able to sleep, and I'd sit up with my mom and keep her awake. And she would almost always put on like, Unsolved Mysteries or Forensic Files. So I was always the kid who was up till 1 a.m, watching that stuff with my mom. And I remember in 94 watching a documentary on like how 94, 95, whatever, about how Kurt Cobain probably didn't kill himself. So like that was something that was always in my mind going back to a very, young age. But this really kicked off not just, with Kurt Cobain's death, but it really was helped along by Kurt Cobain's mother, Wendy Fredensburg Cobain O'Connor. What a long name. She was quoted in the local Aberdeen, Washington newspaper called the Daily World. She said, quote, "Now he's gone and joined that stupid club. I told him not to join that stupid club." And so people are asking, what's this club? And this is where, again, in the zeitgeist, not the first time it had been named that, not the first time it had been talked about, but in the popular zeitgeist, the 27 Club, comes to people's minds. Right. And because of this, people, like I said, they're going back and finding any famous person, celebrity, especially musician, who died at that age. And the most comprehensive list that I found for this actually is on Wikipedia. There's a lot of articles, but they usually list the same 7 people. But Wikipedia actually has a really long list. I counted, it's 85 people on this list, and you can scroll down and see all these. Most of them have, links to their page. They talk about, how they died, when they died, exactly how old they were, how they were famous. What I'm noticing, though, is that a lot of these people, I don't know if a lot, but enough of them have, unknown or not recorded for the cause of death, which adds to a lot of the mystery to this as well. And we'll get into some specific details. But the first known member on this list is a guy named Alexander Levy. He's a Brazilian composer, a pianist, and a conductor. So he was absolutely prolific. If you go on his Wikipedia, you can see, I could actually just bring it up right here. You can actually see this long list of orchestras and chamber music and piano solos. Like this is what he did by the time he was 27. It's kind of wild, isn't it?
Yeah, it's incredible.
Yeah, and he dies early at 27. The internet has no listed cause of death, which is interesting. But this one, again, it's not really the one that most people would start with. Where most people start with this is with a guy named Robert Johnson. Are you familiar with Robert Johnson?
That's the one I was waiting for you to bring up.
Okay, yes. So because these first few, they're kind of like not even American. They're not even anybody people would know. But most people are probably familiar with the legendary blues musician Robert Johnson. And he recorded only 7 months from 1936 to 1937. That was his whole musical career as far as recording goes, as far as having anything good, I should say, because there's a history of him not being such a good guitarist.
Yes.
So his music influenced generations. It's influenced tons of musicians. He's recognized as the master of blues, and he's called one of the most influential musicians of the 20th century. The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame describes him as perhaps, quote, the first ever rock star. So extremely influential, even if people today don't listen to his music or know it. They've probably seen a reference to him. Do you like the movie Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?
I don't think I've seen it. I hate to say it.
You should definitely watch the movie Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? But there's a character, I think it is Robert Johnson. I think they call him that. But if not, he's definitely based on Robert Johnson. They find this blues guitarist at the crossroads, and they pick him up, and he makes a quip about how he sold his soul to the devil. And then they go and record the Soggy Bottom Boys and stuff like that. It's a good movie. It's a good movie. I like it anyway. But
I'll have to check it out.
Yeah. So other than his 2 studio sessions, he had 2 studio sessions in 36 and 37. He records 29 songs. Other than this, there's not a ton actually known about Robert Johnson. You can read his backstory, but it's a lot of it's kind of like this person said this, but it's not really sure. Like he didn't know his dad, and he thought that his stepdad was his dad, and then later in life he might have gone looking for his father in Mississippi. There's a lot of stuff like that. It's kind of just legend and not a lot of super well known facts. His school friends, though, when they were interviewed later in life, they were called him being rather good on the harmonica, but a terrible guitar player. So that's the first instance we get of people saying, "Yeah, we remember him." Standing on the corner with his guitar and trying to play at the blues houses. And he sucked. Everybody says this about him. In 1929, he married a 14-year-old named Virginia Travis, and she died shortly after their marriage in childbirth. And this was around this same time the legendary blues musician named Son House moved next door to Johnson. And he said that Johnson was a competent harmonica player, but an embarrassingly bad guitarist. So we've got another person, and again, a well-known musician that's saying this guy could not play guitar. So after his wife dies and Son House moves next door, he disappears to Arkansas for about 6 months. And he comes back from Arkansas 6 months later, and he is a master at the guitar. And the legend has it that during this time, Robert Johnson met the devil at a crossroads and gave him his soul in exchange for mastery of the guitar. The full story basically goes that he meets the devil, makes a deal, he hands his guitar to the devil tunes the guitar, hands it back to him, and now he's able to play anything, right? Yeah. So this is the legend of Robert Johnson. Other sources that I found attribute Son House with the one who taught him guitar, which Son House denies. Son House says that he would annoy audiences with his guitar playing and that people would tell him to put the guitar down. He's just awful. Like, Son House is not talking this guy up pre-trip to Arkansas.
He's like, he's beyond help. I can't help him.
Exactly. He also confirmed to the blues journalist Pete Welding that Johnson had sold his soul to the devil to become a great guitarist. So a lot of the story comes from Son House. Some people believe that Son House was selling this story as part of musical tourism, as in, if I talk up the legends of this area, that people will come here to see the house of Robert Johnson, things like that. Other people say that the legend originally
Did Johnson
belonged.
ever say that's what he did?
Well, it's hard. There's not a lot about Johnson because he, or from his own mouth, because, he recorded for a few months and then died at 27. So there's, again, like, his music mostly came out after he was dead.
Right. I know there's a picture of him in Anton LaVey and Aquino out there. There
is. Okay, yes. I'll have to look that up.
Yep.
Him and Anton LaVey?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Would Anton LaVey have been?
Pull it up.
Okay, I will look this up. So Robert Johnson.
I thought, yeah.
And Anton LaVey, because I thought Anton LaVey was not around back then.
Maybe I'm mixing that up with someone now. Now I'm questioning
I'm not
myself.
Finding it. Are you thinking of Aleister Crowley?
No.
Okay. Okay. No, if you remember it, I'll look up the picture.
Yeah, I'll have to look it after the show. Now that you say, like, his age doesn't matter. It's another, I think, blues person maybe.
Maybe it was Son House. And I got more stories about him. This is a picture of Robert Johnson, by the way. Mm-hmm. This is one of the few pictures that we have of Robert Johnson. But yeah, so other people say that the original legend actually belonged to a guy named Tommy Johnson. That he was associated with Robert Johnson because of Robert Johnson writing a song called Crossroads. So we got similar time frames, similar musicians, a song about the crossroads. It also doesn't help that he wrote a song called Hellhound on My Tail. He also wrote a song called Me and the Devil Blues. This is Robert Johnson, not Tommy Johnson. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And in Me and the Devil Blues, he says, "Early this morning when you knocked upon my door and I said, 'Hello, Satan, I believe it's time to go,' me and the devil was walking side by side." So we've got, even in his own music, whether he said anything about it or not, we've got at least what some people call this is like the satanic trilogy of Robert Johnson. His song Crossroads, where he sold his soul, Hellhound on My Tail, where the devil's after him, and then Me and the Devil Blues, where the devil shows up to his door and says it's time to go. So that's kind of like written into his music.
That's wild.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then he was, like you said, 7 months of recording before he died.
Yeah. Yeah. Very, very short career for one of the most influential people in music. And again, the first ever rock star, according to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Robert Johnson then died, like I said, August 16th, 1938, at the age of 27. It was near Greenwood, Mississippi. And his death certificate, I looked this up, it only lists his date and location. His death certificate does not give a cause of death. I found multiple people claiming that, like, this is his cause of death, but there is no official cause of death. So I don't know where they're getting it. One person says he had poisoned whiskey. Another person says he dies from syphilis. But I don't know. There's just no cause. There's no official cause of death for Robert Johnson. Right. And I kind of want to talk about the crossroads symbolism, because this is the important part of his story, right? Is like the idea that he meets the devil at a crossroad. And the crossroads symbolism is important because it represents a place between the worlds. So this represents where the two realms meet, a liminal space that's neither here nor there. So it's literally beyond just like, hey, this street crosses this street. Crossroads symbolism goes back a long time, specifically as a meeting place between heaven and earth. So, or not heaven and earth, but like the spiritual realm and earth, right? So hell and earth, whatever. Right. So it's got a long history from before Robert Johnson. It's a place where supernatural spirits can be contacted, contracted, and paranormal events can occur. This is the kind of the symbolism around it. And there's a specific goddess of the crossroads, and her name is Hecate. She's the Greek goddess, I can't speak sometimes, Greek goddess of the crossroads and liminal spaces. And I've actually got...
And witchcraft.
And
too,
witchcraft,
right?
yeah. So I pulled up some pictures of Hecate, and what's funny about this is some of this is going to be really familiar to people if they've seen other things that look like Hecate. One thing my wife pointed out is this. Let me see if I can pull this one up bigger. This picture here is talking about how she's also the image of the maiden, the mother, and the crone, this 3-moon goddess. And my wife was looking at this as I was doing my research. She's like, this symbol of these 3 moons, this is on children's clothes everywhere I look. And she pulled up like a Target app and showed me just young girls' clothes. It's like got all this kind of hidden witchcraft symbolism that a lot of people don't recognize. But you're right. She is the goddess of witchcraft.
Right.
So another.
Yeah, I think people.
Go ahead.
I think people think it's just a fancy celestial design, and are not aware that it's actually associated with witchcraft.
Right. And that's how a lot of this works. Is people just don't know its origins, and that it's got a long history and that it represents certain things. Hecate's also been linked to the Statue of Liberty. You can see this picture on the left is Hecate. This is the Statue of Liberty. This picture on the left again is Hecate, and this is the Statue of Liberty. So a lot of people have made the equation between Hecate, the goddess of liminal spaces, the goddess of witchcraft, and the maiden, the mother, and the crone. All these things have taken this to possibly be a symbol of Lucifer, the light bringer, especially when you look at it in the Statue of Liberty. That it was brought to America by a French Freemason. There's a whole history there. I don't know how deep you've gone into that, because I know you study a lot of the witchcraft stuff too. So tell me if I'm getting this wrong.
No. I haven't studied a lot into the Statue of Liberty other than, it ties to the Prometheus legend, which directly correlates with Lucifer. So... But no, yeah, everything you're saying seems to be spot on.
What I find funny is if you try to Google it, because I've read really good articles about how Hecate and the Freemasonic and satanic idea of Lucifer. Sorry, it's not satanic, but the people who worship Lucifer, who try to make the distinction between Lucifer and Satan, Luciferians, right? When you Google stuff like this, it'll be like, no, Satan and Hecate can't be the same because of this and that and the other. But what they'll ignore is that Lucifer and Hecate are basically the same thing. So my kind of point in this is that even in the Freemasonic religions and stuff like that, they believe that Satan and Lucifer are different, but they're worshiping Lucifer, which is the light bringer who brought the apple to Eve in the garden and things like that. So
the liberator, right? So even though Christians would say that's Satan, they're making that distinction because they worship Lucifer. So yes.
Yeah. Hecate, again, she's the goddess of the underworld. She's a symbol of rebellion. That's why witches use her as their symbolism, same as Lucifer, the light bringer, is a symbol of rebellion. So, and Prometheus, as you brought up, is the same character as Lucifer, especially if you read, I'm going to blank on his name right now, but the big Freemason, 33rd degree Scottish Rite Freemason guy who wrote that long book makes that same point, that the Freemasons worship Lucifer, and that it's the same as Prometheus in there.
Oh, Albert Pike.
Thank you. I am just blanking on all kinds of names today.
What is it? It's something in Dogma. I can't remember.
Morals and Dogma.
Called. Yeah, thank you.
There we go. So I just need a little bit of help sometimes to kickstart that. I'm like, I have it there somewhere.
Me too.
Yeah. So.
Me too. Team effort.
There we go. You know what else I find funny? Because I talk about movies a lot on Real Conspiracies, and I've never covered this one, but there's a movie called Crossroads that features Britney Spears. Have you ever seen that movie?
Yeah, no, but I've heard of it.
It's interesting because I'm not even going to go into it much, but when I looked it up on Wikipedia, it says that this movie was part of a promotional campaign for Britney Spears' memoir. So I find it interesting that you would have that crossroads imagery connected to the memoir of Britney Spears, as in maybe there's some type of crossroads deal with the devil thing going on there.
Right. Well, you know who had a successful song with the name Crossroads is Bone Thugs and Harmony.
Oh, okay. I know them, but I'm not sure I'm familiar with that song.
In 96, it was a chart topper, but and I remember the video a bit, and I know it's about death and stuff, but I feel like they try to make it like an angelic thing. Mm-hmm. It's been a long time since I've seen it though, but they had a song that did very, very well with the name Crossroads.
Yeah, there's so much fallen angel imagery in music videos and stuff like that. And, as the Bible says, Satan will come to you as an angel of light. So even when they're showing them as angelic beings and not fallen angel beings or whatever we would associate with that, with like horns and pitchforks and stuff like that.
Right. But now they're trying to subtly condition us that Satan or Lucifer isn't bad. Like, look at the show Lucifer. Mm-hmm. Look at Sabrina the Teenage Witch, the Netflix show. It's they're trying to I feel like they're trying to at least You can remember in the past when aliens and UFOs, the government was like, no such thing, yada yada yada, and now they've disclosed, oh yeah, they're a thing. So I feel like there's this subtle conditioning happening, and is that going to come out? Are they going to come out at some point and be like, yeah, Lucifer is good?
I'm just waiting for the aliens are good actually argument. Like we've gotten aliens exist now. We've gotten that since 2017. Mm-hmm. It's the soft disclosure leading us towards something. And I think the next part of that is the aliens are good actually. It's some type of Anunnaki thing, which they've prepped the entire population Nephilim. For. Well, yeah, but we would call them Nephilim. But they've prepped the entire population through the History Channel to believe that it's the Anunnaki and that the Anunnaki are good.
Yes.
Like Nephilim have a bad connotation. So if you call them the Anunnaki, then it's all right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But yeah, with this crossroads thing, it's obviously what we're talking about is like a Faustian bargain. I wanted to just go into a little bit of the history of that and we'll get back to the list. But the Faustian bargain is basically deals with the devil. And they've appeared throughout Western mythology for a really long time. But our perception of deals with the devil was kind of popularized by the late 1500s by a guy named Johann Faust. And he's this German alchemist and magician who supposedly made a pact with the demon Mephistopheles, where he traded his soul for knowledge, power, and worldly pleasures. And this tale was made popular by the play The Tragic History of Dr. Faustus by Christopher Marlowe in 1604. But the first Faustian bargain that we see historically in music comes about 100 years later with this composer and violinist named Giuseppe Tartini. And in 1713, the devil appeared to Tartini in a dream. And Tartini then sold his soul to gain something from the devil. And this is where he hands him the violin. I find this interesting because it's the same kind of story that we get with Robert Johnson. He hands him his instrument. And in this case, when he hands the devil his violin, the devil plays the most beautiful sonata that he'd ever heard. And he wakes up from his dream. He tries to write down what he heard, and it just paled in comparison to what the devil had played. And Tartini literally talked about this. He wrote, quote, so inferior to what I had heard. He wrote his song was so inferior to what I had heard that if I could have subsisted on other means, I would have broken my violin and abandoned music forever. So this is coming directly from Tartini's mouth that he had this dream, that he tried to write the Devil's Sonata after this. I think that's what he called it, was the Devil's Sonata. And he's like, it's good, but it's not as good as what Satan played for me in my dreams. There's also a guy named Niccolo Paganini, and he was an 18th century musician. He was one of the most famous violinist composers in history. And the legend has it that his skill was born from a deal his mother made with the devil when he was about 6 years old. And he also did not shy away from these rumors. And he kind of spurned on these rumors so much himself that when he died, there was no church that would take his body. And he was Catholic. So he, for 36 years, he couldn't, his body had no resting place because he, whether it was true or not, fed into the myth around him that he got his skills from the devil. Mm-hmm. So
it almost reminds me of that song too. The Devil Went Down to Georgia. Have you ever heard that one?
Well, that's exactly what it's about, right? The Devil Went Down to Georgia is another Faustian bargain. And in that one, it's kind of twists on its head where it's like, I'll beat you because I'm so good at fiddle, but it's still that classic tale of a violinist. And I'm sure he was referencing Giuseppe or Paganini in some way. That's what
I'm thinking.
Yeah. And probably Robert Johnson as well. I'm guessing that they had heard these tales. Mm-hmm. Which, if they hadn't, that also then it raises the question: was there an actual Faustian bargain offered to?
Right?
Did he take it? I can't remember who does The Devil Went Down to Georgia. I'm going to sound so dumb.
I can't think of it either. I don't think it was someone that had a bunch of hits, and I think it was
a one-hit wonder too. But
yeah,
it's Charles. I'm going to look this up now.
Yeah.
The devil.
You look it up. My internet's too unstable for me to be bouncing back and forth.
Charlie Daniels. Gosh dang. I was like, it was right on the tip of my tongue. It's like Charlie Daniels. Yes. Charlie Daniels Band. So, I don't know how much like digging you've ever done into this idea, but it's one that people have heard about a lot. It's not backed up by the Bible, but like I've heard a lot of people bring up the idea that Lucifer was the angel of music. And some people I think just actually believe it's in the Bible. Mythology and popular culture have given us this idea that Satan was the angel of music before the fall, that he led the heavenly choir. Are you back?
Yeah, can you hear me?
You just blinked out for a minute there.
This is terrible. I'm sorry. I could hear everything you said though. So, but I don't think there's anything in scripture that says that, but I have heard he's like the angel. He was the angel of music.
Yeah. And it's not like biblically backed up, but I do have to wonder if there's a reason why this belief exists. And that maybe it's tied to all this. Right. So that was kind of like my first thought of going to the
far back it goes.
Right, exactly. And that was kind of my first thought looking into the 27 Club, is it feels evil and satanic in some way, and is it like it does it have to do with Faustian bargains? And we'll get into a lot of theories on it later, but that's kind of the first one that I want to put in front of people before we talk about the list. And as I said, the list really starts to take place in 1969 to 1971. It starts with this guy, that part of the list starts with this guy named Brian Jones. And Brian Jones was the founding member of the Rolling Stones. And he died in 1969 after supposedly mixing alcohol and drugs and then diving into a swimming pool at his home in England. Unrelated, but I found out the home that he bought in England belonged to A.A. Milne before this, the guy who wrote Winnie the Pooh.
Oh, gosh.
Which is just an interesting connection there.
Yeah.
Anyway, this whole thing takes place 3 months after he's fired from the Rolling Stones. And he's fired because he's not able to tour with them anymore because he's facing drug convictions and he's, in and out of court and things like that. And but by all accounts, even though it was early on, I think at this point they had 6 U.S. albums. They had 8 albums in total, including ones that were released in the U.K. and the U.S. The Rolling Stones was a huge deal by this point, playing Woodstock, things like that. But he was considered instrumental in their success. But he barely contributed to the previous 2 studio albums, including Beggar's Banquet and Let It Bleed. I think on Let It Bleed, he literally just did like a tambourine or something on one song. It's like, like he's just barely a member of the band at this point.
Cowbell.
yeah, it needs more cowbell. But like they were like at this point the Rolling Stones were so rich and so famous and so drugged out that when they went to the studio, they didn't even go together. Like they were just showing up at different times with entourages. Their studio sessions were so notoriously bad for their album, the last album that Brian Jones contributed on, that they called it the Satanic Sessions. And it might have been called the Satanic Sessions for other reasons, though. And the other reasons might be because the title of that album was Their Satanic Majesty's Request. And this is the cover of the album. And I mean, I could probably spend all day picking apart the imagery in this, the crescent moon and the Saturn.
Mick Jagger was in, that Kenneth Anger film.
Yeah. I've totally forgot about that. Why am I blanking on how Kenneth Anger was related to the Manson clan somehow, right?
He followed Aleister Crowley.
That's what it was. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Aleister Crowley had so much influence over this period of music. It's crazy. And that could be
like the Beatles album.
Yeah. He's on, I can't remember.
Pepper.
Sgt. Pepper. That's it. Yeah. But there's so much satanic imagery in this. And what's crazy is I found out that even though this cover, again, you could pick it apart for a whole day just on this amount of symbolism in it. Do you want to know
an episode on it?
You could, but do you want to know what they were going to do for the album cover before they settled on this?
What?
They were going to have Mick Jagger naked on a cross. That was going to be the album cover.
First of all, I don't want to see Mick Jagger naked. Like, sorry.
I'll pass.
But then and on a cross, that's just blasphemous right there. But definitely, no.
Yeah.
Go rinse my eyes.
Okay, I'm glad because I don't understand Mick Jagger. Like I was having this conversation earlier. Why Mick Jagger, who looks like he does, and Kenny Chesney, who looks like a turkey? Why are women obsessed with these two?
I don't know. I am not on that bandwagon. I'll tell you that right now.
All right, it's good to know. I mean, it's just money and fame, right? Because Mick Jagger, by all accounts, is a very unattractive human being.
Yes. And they do have that song, Sympathy for the Devil, too.
Yeah. And there's so much stuff with the Rolling Stones. There was the Sympathy with the Devil. Mick Jagger was really leaning heavily into satanic symbolism. And there's, what's that song? Don't Forget Me. Do you remember my name? Something like that, where he's like saying I'm the devil. Mick Jagger put a lot of satanic imagery in his stuff.
Yeah, that's Sympathy for the Devil.
Is that Sympathy for the Devil? Okay. Yeah. I was mixing that up with another one.
Right.
And then there's also, Keith Richards.
Please allow me to introduce myself.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, that's Sympathy for the Devil. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I've never been a Rolling Stones fan, so I'm sorry. But
I know a little bit, but I wouldn't say enough to call myself a fan.
Yeah. Keith Richards at this time, he was getting really into like hoodoo and voodoo and stuff like that. He would keep, I think I put this in my notes somewhere. Maybe I didn't, but he would keep like voodoo stuff on him all the time. He wore like garlic cloves around his neck because he was afraid of vampires. Like just a lot of weird stuff going on with Keith Richards. This is what
doing drugs regularly does to you kids.
Yeah. But talking about Keith Richards, like with Brian Jones, it seems like his death is cut and dry if you just read the cause of death. He gets drunk, he does drugs, he swims, right? Then he dies. But according to Keith Richards, he once said, quote, and still the mystery of his death hasn't been solved. I don't know what happened, but there was some nasty business going on, and it's just kind of left there. And his own bandmates don't believe that he just killed himself, essentially, right? His girlfriend at the time, Brian Jones' girlfriend at the time, swears that he had a pulse when she found him and pulled him from the pool around midnight that day. But he was pronounced DOA when he got to the hospital. So there's some weirdness there. There was a report in 1993 that he had gotten into a fight with a carpenter named Frank Thorogood, who killed Jones in a dispute over money, but it never really went anywhere. That was just a thing that people were saying. But it was just weird. Like he was supposedly the last guy to see Jones alive. So already the 27 Club's got weirdness going on. It's like it seems cut and dry. And as I'll point out, I don't know what your thoughts are on Kurt Cobain when we get to that point, but I've been thoroughly convinced that he didn't kill himself. But
no, I don't believe he did.
Yeah. So the next person on this list is a guy named Alan Blind Owl Wilson. He was the founder of Canned Heat, which I don't know this band at all. Are you familiar?
I'm not sure I do either. No.
I mean, their crowning achievement was playing Woodstock in '69, so it's the same era. The famous back then. Right. I don't know if they have a lot of staying power. Maybe other people know him. He was a big fan of the blues, though. Alan Wilson was, and he actually collaborated with Son House, who was that guy I was talking about earlier, who lived next to Robert Johnson. So there's a weird connection there that I thought was interesting. He was found dead in his backyard, lying peacefully in a sleeping bag. He was supposed to go to a show or a tour or a studio session, something like that, and they didn't know where he was. They found him at his friend's house, another singer, and he liked to sleep outside, and he apparently had his hands crossed over his chest and a bottle of barbiturates next to his side, and it was ruled an accidental overdose. But the drummer of his band said that he believes that he committed suicide. So there's another death in '69, part of the 27 Club. Jimi Hendrix follows this. I think everybody knows who Jimi Hendrix is.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
I would hope so.
He is widely regarded as the greatest guitarist in the history of popular music and one of the most influential musicians of the 20th century. He played with the Isley Brothers, and then he played for Little Richard, and this was all before he moved to England and started the Jimi Hendrix Experience in 1966. And within a few months of starting the Jimi Hendrix Experience, he had 3 top 10 hits in the UK. So another, like, I wouldn't say overnight success, but like, because he'd been working for it for a long time. He'd been playing guitar since he was 15. It's not a Robert Johnson situation, but once the Jimi Hendrix Experience started, it was just a skyrocket to fame, from now till his death. In 1968, his third album and his final album, Electric Ladyland, reached #1 in the US, and by September of 1970, he spent his final night with his girlfriend where they were mixing wine and drugs. He allegedly took 9 Vesparax, which is a powerful barbiturate. It's to help you sleep. You're supposed to break it in half and take a half of one. So apparently he took 18 times the limit of what you're supposed to take of this. And drugs were way different back then. Like sleeping drugs were way different in the 60s. You know what I mean? So he took 9 of these. and he was found dead in the bathroom from an overdose the next morning. And he got, again, he'd been playing guitar for a long time, but there's a story that says that he got so good between 1964, his days with the Isley Brothers, and his 1966 debut with the Jimi Hendrix Experience, that people who used to play with him, people who toured with him back then, didn't recognize him, didn't know who he was. They were like, oh, I knew this guy James Hendrix, who was kind of this, kid who played guitar, but he was whatever. And one of those friends, met him years later, and he comes up to him and he asks him, hey, there's a rumor going around that you took a trip to the Crossroads. So even in this time, people were asking that question about Jimi Hendrix. And apparently he would just laugh and say, no, I took a trip to the woodshed, which just meant that he practiced really, really hard. So...
Oh, gosh. Well, who also probably was becoming big around this time, too, and they're not part of the 27 Club, but they've admitted pretty much that they sold their soul as Bob Dylan. Have you seen that video of Bob Dylan being interviewed?
Yeah, I have. Yeah. He had to have, though, right? I mean, I don't know, this is going to be an unpopular opinion, but you ever listen to music that everybody loves and you're like, do people actually like this, or is there some spell put on this to make people like it?
I'm sure you're going to hit Janis Joplin, but I feel that way.
That is who's next. Yeah, Janis Joplin. But I feel that way about Bob Dylan. It's like, do people actually like Bob Dylan, or is there a spell put over his music that people like it, but they don't know why? I think he's awful, personally.
Yeah. Well, that's how I'm like, Janis Joplin's voice is just, I don't know. It's not aesthetically pleasing to me, but to each their own.
Her voice, her looks, I don't understand Janis Joplin, but she died 3 weeks after Jimi Hendrix, also at 27. I don't know if it was 3 weeks, but a few weeks after Jimi Hendrix's death. In 1965, she found success with this group called Big Brother and the Holding Company. She released 2 albums with them, and then she split in 1969, released her 3rd album, which was a solo album. And, she also played at Woodstock and stuff like that. These were these groundbreaking moments in her career. Right. And on October 4th, 1970, there's a story that goes that Janis was stood up for a threesome the night that she killed herself. She drugged herself to death, essentially. But apparently her fiance, Seth Morgan, and her best friend / sometimes lover, Peggy Caserta, were supposed to meet her in her hotel room for a threesome.
Wow.
Neither of them show up. It's just a weird story. So neither of them show up. She then overdoses on heroin. And this is where the story gets weird, because there's a lot of different stories about this, and they seem to all come from her, road manager and her fiance and her best friend, and all these people who were around her at this time are all kind of telling different stories. So some of the stories say that they found her OD'd and they started to hide the drugs, and then the toxicology report came out that she had drugs, so it was kind of pointless to hide the drugs anyway. And according to her sometimes lover, Peggy Caserta, she actually had tripped and hit her head on the end table. There's a huge gash. So I find it interesting because, again, there's all these conflicting things of she died from an OD or she died because she tripped and broke her skull open. And what we do know is that by everybody's account, they messed with the crime scene. So it's kind of just weird in that aspect to me, is again, another part of the 27 Club, but what we get is conflicting stories, and what we know is a fact is that her death scene was tampered with. So
right. Could
there be foul play? I don't know.
Yeah.
But not a big fan of Janis Joplin, though, so we can move on.
No. Nope.
Me neither. Jim Morrison.
My dad might slap me for that, but
yeah. Oh well. Yeah, I don't know. I never got it either. So I was never a fan of the Doors either, who we're going to talk about next. I don't know. I wasn't into druggy culture in high school where everybody liked Pink Floyd and the Doors, so maybe that's why.
I mean, I wouldn't say in high school I was into the Doors, but as as I grew older, I had more of an appreciation for them and know more about their songs and everything now. So,
excuse me. Yeah. So Jim Morrison's the next one on this list. He's known as the Lizard King. He's kind of this iconic image from the 60s of the counterculture movement. his face is always kind of put up there as like that, and he even names his band The Doors, which is based off of Aldous Huxley's The Doors of Perception. So they're pushing psychedelics and things like that. I don't know if you're familiar with The Doors of Perception and how it talks about.
Yeah, I know a little bit about it. Yeah. What's also interesting is his dad. You know about his dad?
Aldous Huxley's dad?
Jim Morrison's. No,
yeah,
Jim Morrison's
I was going to bring up Jim Morrison's dad next, but yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I'm not going to say anything more. No. You.
Well,
it's all you.
Yeah, what's interesting, again, he names his band after Aldous Huxley's The Doors of Perception. There's a whole weird history with the Huxley family, by the way, which I don't have to get into
that
right now.
I'm not familiar with.
Yeah, I've covered it before, and I don't remember all of it right now, but it's strange. Yeah, it's strange. So...
Okay.
What some people believe about Jim Morrison, though, is that he might have been something of a deep state plant. And one of the reasons, the first obvious reason is this is when the government is trying to get everybody to try LSD. They're testing MK Ultra now on the public. They're using, I'm blanking on names right now. The Grateful Dead. They're using the Grateful Dead and other bands who we know that people in the Grateful Dead were actual test subjects of MK Ultra, then given LSD to give to the people. And Jim Morrison is kind of part of this. So there's that connection. But there's also this book called Weird Scenes Inside the Canyon by Dave McGowan. Have you ever heard of this?
Love Dave. Yes, okay. Love Dave McGowan. Big fan of Program to Kill.
Yeah, he's really good. And this is a really good book. And in it, he kind of talks about how this Laurel Canyon music scene had all these connections to the government. And Jim Morrison is no exception. His dad, George Stephen Morrison, led the naval fleet during the Gulf of Tonkin incident. And if you're familiar with the Gulf of Tonkin incident, this is the huge red flag that kicked off the Vietnam War. So as Jim Morrison is going out there, pushing psychedelics and saying he's against the war and all of this stuff, like behind the scenes, he hates his following. He hates this hippie movement. He talks about this with his friends. He's not a part of it. And it leads people to think that he's kind of, a plant, which is what I think. But again, that's a whole longer episode about weird scenes from inside the canyon. But I thought I'd bring it up.
Yes.
Interesting stuff. Yeah. So he also has this weird experience as a child that led him to become obsessed with death and the occult, according to his own writing, his own poetry and his songs. And he tells this story where he was traveling with his family. I think he was about 4 years old, and they came across an accident that left all these American Indians dead across the road. Right. And he talks about this in his song, The Ghost Song, in 1978. And he describes what happens next. He says, quote, "The souls and the ghosts of those dead Indians, maybe one or two of them, were just running around freaking out and just leaped into my soul, and they're still there." So he's got this weird kind of possession story from a young age. And it's really strange. He also has a song called When the Music's Over. And a lot of people have interpreted this as what his wishes were when he dies. Basically the idea around Jim Morrison, maybe this is more the myth around Jim Morrison than the facts, but basically that he didn't love anything in life except music, and when music was over, his life was over. And that was kind of what he hints at in this song. And he says in the lyrics, he says, "Cancel my subscription to the resurrection, send my credentials to the house of detention, I got some friends inside." So, sounds like he knows that he's damned, and he's talking about it in this song as well. He also calls himself a Lizard King, which I find interesting. He talks about it like an alter ego. And if you've ever looked into like musicians and alter egos, it really comes across as demonic possession at some point. Sasha Fierce, Beyonce's alternate version.
Like that one picture, she just doesn't even look
human.
Or,
Yeah, she doesn't. Eminem's got Slim Shady. And the way they talk about these alternate egos, it's not like this is the stage persona I put on. It's not like, The Rock, which is an alter ego when he goes out and performs for WWE or whatever. It's it really comes across more like possession. I wonder that about Jim Morrison with the Lizard King persona. He also had another nickname called Mr. Mojo Rising, which has a darker connotation.
Mojo Bag.
Sorry, what?
So there's a Mojo Bag. It's an occult thing. I think it was used in hoodoo. It was like a bag to keep, magic and stuff in and spells or talismans, things like that. So
yeah, exactly. Because Mojo is dark energy, dark power in hoodoo and voodoo and shamanism. Yeah. So he's definitely got that whole thing going on. He records a total of 6 albums with the Doors. all of which sold well. They did great. Everything was going good for the Doors until July 3rd, 1971. Well, not everything was going good. Like, he starts showing up like drunk as crap at shows, and I mean, he's falling apart publicly before this. But the Doors are extremely successful. Jim Morrison's gaining weight. He's falling apart. He's kind of got like an Elvis thing going on almost.
Yeah.
And he's found dead in his bathtub in his apartment in Paris. And the official cause of death is heart failure at 27. Not drug overdose, but just heart failure. So some people have said it was drug overdose, but again, there's no autopsy performed. They just say heart failure. 27-year-old heart failure. This is fine. Move on. It's weird. Just like that in and of itself is weird. There's also this book written by Sam Burnett, and it's called The End, Jim Morrison. According to him, Jim actually overdosed on heroin in the bathroom of Paris's Rock and Roll Circus Club, and that his friends had found him there and drove him across town and placed him in his bathtub. His apartment was found by his girlfriend, Pamela Coulson. It's not really backed up. A lot of people don't believe this story, but it's interesting.
What would be the purpose of it?
I don't know. They're trying to avoid a drug scandal. I don't know if I really buy this story, but it is a story that's put out there. I thought I'd bring it up. But Pamela Coulson is interesting because she dies a few years later, April 25th, 1974, from a drug overdose. She's also 27 when she dies.
Wow.
So Jim Morrison
That's wild.
And his girlfriend, both 27 club.
Wow.
So not directly after his death, but once she turns 27, it's pretty weird. Yeah,
that's wild.
And I can't talk about Jim Morrison's death without talking about the bathtub ritual, right? Are you familiar with this?
Oh, yes.
Because I'm sure some people listen to this are like, holy crap, he died in a bathtub. You know, that's weird. So there's a history of celebrities dying in bathtubs. So there's Jim Morrison, obviously, in 1971. There's Whitney Houston in 2012. Whitney Houston's daughter, Bobby Christina Brown, 3 years later, dies in a bathtub, 2015. Dolores O'Riordan, singer of the Cranberries, dies in a bathtub in 2018.
Yep.
Aaron Carter in 2022. And then I put question mark Matthew Perry 2023 because it wasn't a bathtub, it was a hot tub. But all the symbolism is there for Matthew Perry. And I've broken this down in the past, how, you know, there's a lot of weird symbolism around Matthew Perry's death that makes me think it's part of this same ritual.
Right. And I do remember, like, when the whole thing, I think they were also in Paris. Was it Kanye and Kim Kardashian when they were together and they were robbed? And I heard certain accounts saying he was freaking out because they put her in the bathtub.
Yes, I totally forgot about this story till you brought it up, but you're right. According to Kanye West, in Paris, they threatened to kill Kim in a bathtub, and it freaked him out. So yeah, there's a whole weird thing with this bathtub thing. I also passed over, we were talking about Pamela Coulson for a minute, but you said to me, do you thought she was a witch or something like that?
Yeah. She practiced witchcraft. Yes, I believe it's portrayed in one of those movies, maybe the one with Val Kilmer.
I love Val Kilmer as an actor, and I've never seen his portrayal of Jim Morrison. I think I need to. Yeah.
I think I need to too. So, but yeah, I believe, no, I've heard before that she was a witch or a practicing witch. So
it wouldn't surprise me. Like I said, I feel like Aleister Crowley was so popular in these circles, and there was so much weird witchcraft stuff going on behind the scenes, whether it was just an aesthetic or not. I don't think it was just an aesthetic. I think that's what they want you to think, but yeah.
Right. I think it accompanied the whole hippie movement because, you know, there started that new age.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. The New Age stuff is all kind of just like witchcraft anyway. So
yes, yeah, yep.
But yeah, so the bathtub thing, I know a lot of people have asked me like, why is it important that people die in bathtubs? And there's a lot of weird symbolism here, right? So like some occult traditions associate water with a spiritual gateway. That's your first kind of idea, right? There's a spiritual gateway with water, which makes a bathtub a ritualistic setting for crossing into a spiritual realm. This is shown perfectly in the movie Constantine, by the way, where they literally use the bathtub to cross into hell. The bathtub then becomes a vessel because it can hold blood and water, blood, life, water, the soul's journey or the portal to death. The ritual is believed to have three purposes. You've got the first one, which is control, which I think you kind of brought up with Kim and Kanye, right? Is like this idea of this is a calling card. You know, we're going to eliminate individuals who are a threat to our system, to its secrecy, to whatever. And that if we kill you in a bathtub, everybody will get the calling card that this is this is what happens if you kind of, cross the people who run the music industry.
Right.
There's more occult.
Yeah, and they talk about water being a conduit, like for the spiritual realm, like you said.
Yeah. I mean, that's like I always bring up Constantine because that's like he literally just explains that whole thing, calls it a conduit.
It's funny because I covered Constantine with another a fellow podcaster. So, and I still have on my to listen to list your coverage of it. To see like if we like came to the same conclusions and everything. So yeah, I did a post on it a while back, and then I was asked to cover it and stuff because there's supposedly part 2 coming out, which I'm super excited about.
I am too, because as much as Constantine is steeped into Freemasonic and occult symbolism, huge fan of that movie. I really love that movie, and I covered that one on Real Conspiracies. When this is over, send me the link to the one you did. I want to listen to it now.
Okay, yeah, but it's I'm super excited. Funny story, my dad and I are like father-daughter bonding movies, are John Wick movies.
Nice.
And we finished them, and he's like, "What are we going to watch now?" And I'm like, "I know." So I put on Constantine. He's like, he's playing the same character. I'm like, I know, isn't it great?
Constantine is just John Wick with like demons and stuff. I love it. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. 100%.
Yeah, Constantine's a great movie. Another part of the ritual, the believed purpose of the bathtub ritual is to renew power. And I talked about this with Matthew Perry in the past. But the idea is that you would offer a life to gain supernatural favor or to sustain your group's success. So this is literally a sacrifice. It's also possibly a way to transfer demonically attached entities from one star who's on their way out to an up and coming star who's getting ready for fame. And I bring that up because in the Matthew Perry incident, there was all this symbolism with Doja Cat signaling Matthew Perry's death. And then Matthew Perry dies in this very symbolic way. And my theory at the time was that it was a transference of the Faustian bargain. Matthew Perry in his book talks about having a Faustian bargain to get fame, literally making a deal with the devil for his fame. So when Doja Cat is signaling Matthew Perry's death and then he dies and Doja Cat's like the next big thing, that was kind of my theory on it. And I think the third one I already kind of said, symbolic messaging, warning to other people in the industry. This is the calling card.
Right.
This is why if Kim Kardashian dies in a bath, people know that Kim Kardashian or Kanye West did something they weren't supposed to do or said something they weren't supposed to say.
You're right. Yeah.
Yeah. I thought it would be a good part to bring that up. Next person I have on the list is a guy named Ron. I can't speak. Ron Pigpen McKernan, I think is how it's said. He was a founding member of the Grateful Dead, who I brought up earlier.
Oh, okay.
By 1972, his health had become so fragile that he couldn't tour anymore. He had cirrhosis of the liver and he had ulcers related to his drinking problems. And he died from an internal hemorrhage in March of 1973. But he was dead for 2 days before he was found. There's not a lot of weirdness with it, but it's, again, related to all these bands in this time. Right. 27 years old, makes the list. A guy named Pete Ham. I'll go over a few of them quickly that I don't find a lot of weird stuff with. Pete Ham was the guitarist for Badfinger. He hung himself in his garage 3 days before he turned 28 on April 24th, 1975. And then this is where we kind of transfer from the Woodstock music scene, which is where the original 27 Club gets its founding, right? And there's a lot of names I'm leaving off of my coverage, but this is where we transfer from that to the Seattle grunge scene, which is where the 27 Club becomes popularized. And it starts with 3 deaths that happen within the same year. All through, again, just like in 69 to 71, there was 4 major deaths, actually 5, I think I listed here, happened in 3 years. But in Seattle, it was 3 deaths in the same year, all 27. And the first one is this lady named Mia Zapata.
Yes, I'm familiar with her case.
I was going to ask if you were, because there's like, I'm trying to remember, there was a lot of songs written back at this time about her case. I think Nirvana had one of their songs was about this.
I'm only familiar with it because I'm a crime junkie.
Gotcha.
So I think it was an episode on one of those, what is it?
Like
Discovery ID channel.
Yeah.
I think it was covered in one of those episodes. I wasn't actually familiar with the music or the Grits. Was it the Grits?
Yeah, you're right. So the Grits, it was a female grunge band from Seattle. She was brutally beaten, raped, and strangled to death in July of 1993. And this is when Nirvana and Pearl Jam helped raise thousands of dollars to hire a private investigator to look into her murder that wasn't solved supposedly until 2003.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this was a big deal in the Seattle grunge scene. Even though Mia Zapata and the Grits aren't really super well known, like worldwide, I should say, the way that like Nirvana is, everybody in the Seattle music scene knew who she was. So it's a big deal back then.
And it was grunge was up and coming, so I feel like as a community, they felt.
Well, right. I don't even think Nirvana was like the biggest band yet by this time. So they were still like, they probably had played a lot of, shows together back then. It was a smaller music scene that grew, just like the Laurel Canyon music scene grew in the 60s. Yeah. So this is a very similar thing. But following her death is the big one that makes every 27 Club list. And that's Kurt Cobain, obviously the founder, guitarist, vocalist, lead singer of Nirvana. He was found dead in the greenhouse of his Seattle home on April 8th, 1994. He had a shotgun lying across his chest. He had a suicide note addressed to his wife, Courtney Love, and his daughter, Frances Bean Cobain, that was found nearby. And I've gone really into depth on this. We can talk about, I don't know how familiar you are with this case, and we can talk about how weird it is. But I was just going to kind of sum it up. But if you read his suicide note, it reads more like a retirement letter from the music industry than a suicide note. A lot of people have pointed this out. There's this one section, the last few lines, that read more like a suicide note, but it feels disjointed from the rest. And not just in tone, but the handwriting is different. And the weirdest thing one of the most damning things, in my opinion, for Courtney Love being behind this is that her lawyer tells a story of how after Kurt's death, a piece of paper fell out of Courtney Love's purse, and she picked it up, and it was Courtney Love practicing writing in Kurt Cobain's handwriting.
Yeah.
It's pretty weird. There's a lot of things that make me think Courtney was behind this. Her lawyer actually... Not only her lawyer, but the private investigator she hired. I think I have his name in my notes somewhere. Tom Grant. He's behind the documentary Soaked in Bleach. He has believed that she's guilty for this for a long time.
Yeah, it was I don't know, several years ago I saw that. It's been a while, but I definitely made me believe that she was behind it. I do believe her dad had held some high governmental job or something, or CIA or something like that. I can't remember though.
It's been a long time since I did this episode, but I did an episode on MK Ultra celebrities for a different podcast a long time ago. And from what I remember, her uncle, but not really her uncle, but like she called him her uncle, I think, was Jerry Garcia of the Grateful Dead. There's stories there's stories of her parents giving her LSD by the time she was 3. She was in some type of therapy by the time she was 3 because of her LSD use. My point is she was an MK Ultra test subject back then. There is weird connections between her parents and the CIA and Jerry Garcia and MK Ultra and that whole thing. And then there's this really strange story of her going to Europe and dating the lead singers of all these bands in Europe and breaking up the music scene over there before coming back to America, dating Billy Corgan and then dating Kurt Cobain. So she's weird. There's a whole weird story with her. Yeah. So the idea that she's behind Kurt Cobain's death doesn't surprise me the least. There's a guy, I can't remember his name, but he's a local guy. He said that she paid him $50,000 to whack Kurt Cobain, and he seemed to know some details. There's other strange stuff. Like he had, I have this somewhere in my notes. He had so much heroin in his system, 1.52 milligrams per liter in his bloodstream, which is 3 times, according to certain people, everybody will disagree with me on this, but according to some experts, this is 3 times the lethal dose for even an extremely heavy user of heroin. And so a lot of people have said, well, how would he be able to shoot himself on that much heroin? The other argument goes something like this. If you're on that much heroin, you feel really good and you're probably just going to like pass out. Like heroin users don't shoot themselves in the head is the argument. It never, I shouldn't say never, but it pretty much never happens because they'll OD before they'll shoot themselves. Yeah.
Right. And it's more difficult to do with a shotgun.
It is. It is. Also, the casing was ejected the wrong direction if he had shot it himself. There's a lot of weird stuff here. It's a long episode, but my point is that if you really look into it, I find it hard to believe that he killed himself. It's not that he wasn't suicidal, depressed, things like that. It's just that the circumstances around his death are so damning for Courtney Love. And I forget the name of the guy who's house sitting for them. But when Tom Grant shows up, he's literally like looking through the house for Kurt Cobain for days. And he never once mentions that there is a room above the garage to Tom Grant. But what he's doing is he's constantly calling electricians saying, hey, when are you going to get out here and fix the lights in the room above the garage? So even though he's not telling Tom Grant about it, he's trying to get an electrician out there who eventually is who discovered Kurt Cobain's body 3 days after he was dead. So it's pretty damning when you add it up.
For sure.
Add it up. Yeah. I don't know. Anyway, Kurt Cobain's a whole interesting subject, but following Kurt Cobain's death, again, dies at 27, suspicious as hell circumstances. I didn't know this one till I was doing this research. Kristen Pfaff. I don't know how you pronounce this. Pfaff. Pfaff.
I'm not sure.
Pfaff. I don't know. She was a member of Courtney Love's band Hole. She was also one of the people who was at Kurt Cobain's funeral, which was not a lot of people. And 2 months after Kurt Cobain's death, she died of a heroin overdose in a bathtub in a Seattle apartment. So you've got the bathtub symbolism coming back. She's literally in the member of Courtney Love's band, friends with Kurt Cobain, dies 2 months later. So there's your triptych, your three 27 Club members in Seattle in 1993 to 94. Yeah, I don't. Well, the moral of the story is avoid Courtney Love like she's the plague.
Yes.
Because she basically is like, yeah. So
I know he's not in the 27 Club, but he probably was close. Lane Staley from Alice in Chains.
Well, oh yeah, he didn't show up on the list. How do you spell his first name?
He didn't. Lane.
Lane. Okay, it's just I was thinking there was an I in it.
He probably was maybe.
He was 34.
Close to 30. Oh, okay.
According to this.
Yeah, I knew he was. Yeah, but he had a tragic death.
April 5th, 2002 in Seattle as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I wasn't super familiar with his death, but it was it a drug overdose as well? It looks like it says a speedball overdose.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Weird. Lot of weird stuff there. Another guy that came up in my research is a guy named Richie Edwards, who's the guitarist from the Manic Street Preachers. He went missing in 1995. His car was found at an abandoned gas station 2 weeks after he went missing. And still to this day, apparently, there's no trace that has ever been found of him. He just disappears and he's declared dead. 27 is when he disappears. So maybe dead, maybe part of the 27 Club. It definitely comes up as one of the weirder cases.
Yeah.
A big one. The next big one is Amy Winehouse. How familiar are you with Amy Winehouse? I didn't know who she was until she died, to be honest with you.
So I knew she was around, but it wasn't the type of music I was into. So, I mean, I knew she, I knew about her before her death, but I didn't I wasn't a fan. So
the only song I know of hers is They Tried to Make Me Go to Rehab. And I said, no. Like, that's the only thing that comes to my mind when I think of her. Wasn't really super familiar with her. I remember when she died because people were talking about it. And obviously she was the next name in the 27 Club. And she even predicted that she would be part of the 27 Club. She had said it multiple times. Alex Haynes was a friend of hers, and other friends had also said that she predicted she would join the ranks of the 27 Club. So she said things like, I don't want to join the 27 Club. I don't think I'm going to make it. I think I'm going to die and be part of the 27 Club. So it kept coming up. And then the question then becomes, I think, was she afraid of joining the 27 Club because she knew that people would kill her at that time if that they could, or that she just thought she'd burn out and OD? Because that's kind of like the normie answer to the 27 Club. Is 27 is an age where, rock stars are reaching the peak of their career, and, they've probably got 2 to 3 studio albums out, and they're getting burnout and drugs and heroin and stuff like that. But I don't know. Yeah,
it makes you wonder if she knew she was such a bad addict, that she knew she was going to the drugs were going to kill her.
Right. Yeah. So she died July 23rd, 2011. She was found dead in her home. She had 0.416% blood alcohol content, which is a lot. It's a lot. Her death was classified as a death by misadventure, which is a fancy way of saying it was an accident, but it was due to risky behavior, as in she was kind of gambling with her life. Found next to 2 empty vodka bottles. She had relapsed. She had been clean, apparently, which leads into, if she was clean and then fell off the wagon, it would make sense that her body would have a harder time handling that much alcohol.
Right.
She was a drug user before this: heroin, crack, cocaine, all of those things. When she quit those, it became alcohol. When she quit that, she started to look better and then apparently just fell off the wagon. There was a lot of people in her circle, people who had worked for Jimi Hendrix even. I found articles saying that people who had used to work with and knew Jimi Hendrix were around her saying she's going to be part of the 27 Club. There's no way she's going to make it past that. So it's a lot of weird talk and kind of predictions of her joining this club before it happened.
Yes.
Yeah. And then obviously I mentioned Anton Yelchin. This is the only one I'm going to bring up. One of the only ones I want to bring up is not a musician, but he was a musician, I guess. He had his own band, but that's not what he's known for. So
gotcha.
Anton Yelchin, as I said, he was the star of Odd Thomas. He was in the Star Trek series, an up-and-coming actor. Not up-and-coming, he was really famous at this time. He was really at the top of his game. And on June 18th, 2016, he was crushed by his own car in his driveway of his home. His friends said that they grew concerned for him after he didn't show up to a rehearsal. What I find interesting is nothing says what this rehearsal was for, what movie said it was. There's just no information on it, which is odd. They say they found him dead in his driveway at about 1 a.m. So they're concerned for him because he misses a 9 a.m. meeting. They come to his house at 1 a.m. for some reason. Nothing says what movie it was. It's just kind of weird. The official cause for his death is blunt traumatic asphyxia from his car, which means that he put his car in neutral instead of park, is the story, and that it rolled backwards and crushed him against his mailbox. There was a recall on this car. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration investigated Fiat Chrysler for vehicles in February. He died in June. So there was already a recall out for this car, basically saying that they were rolling away when people thought they put them in park. And it's kind of weird because it didn't, like, a lot of people say that the cars came out of park. But what actually happened is that people would, like the shifter would, like, have you ever been in a car where that you push the shifter and it clicks into the next gear and you just keep clicking it like this? That's what this was. And so if it was in reverse and you went to put it in park, it would be right there, which I find interesting. So I feel like if it's staying in reverse would make more sense in neutral instead of him shifting it the other way. But I guess what they're saying is that he thought he clicked it into park, got out of his car, it was still in neutral, rolled back and crushed him. TMZ is the only source I found that said that there was a camera pointed directly at the site of it. Nobody else mentions this, and everybody else says, well, we're just theorizing what happened. So I find it interesting that there is footage, yet there's not a conclusive, this is what happened. Like, maybe there's something weird going on. I don't know.
Yeah.
A lot of people think this one's weird. He's the only person who ever died from this particular recall. So
wow,
it's kind of strange. He dies at 27. What I also found interesting is that there's no mention of what movie that he missed the rehearsal for that day. But what I did find is there's an article about this movie called Travis that he was scheduled to begin production on 3 weeks later, July 11th. And this film centered around an actor and amateur photographer who witnessed the murder of a young woman after following her back to her apartment. And it's weird because he had this period, Anton Yelchin had this period in his early 20s where he would meet people on Craigslist and take all these weird photographs. And I can't show them because they're kind of pornographic.
Yeah.
But it's all this creepy BDSM voyeurism stuff. And most of the photographs are taken where you can tell he's outside of a hotel window taking the shot in. And the theory,
very
voyeuristic, right? So I find it interesting that he was writing a movie about, it was going to be the first time he directed a movie, he wrote it himself, about a photographer who was doing this type of work who witnessed a murder. So I don't know if it was like he was going to say something that he shouldn't have said, that maybe his movie was a little bit extremely autobiographical, or if it was just inspired by that time. But there's not a lot to talk about this movie other than this one article that you can find that other people have just copied and reposted. I think it came from IndieWire originally. So kind of interesting.
Oh, wow.
The last person I want to bring up on this list is a guy named Benjamin Keough. I don't know how you say it, Keough. But he was Elvis's grandson.
Oh.
And he died by suicide on July 12th of 2020. So, I don't know. Elvis, there's like a lot of conspiracy theories around Elvis and whether or not he really died. And then his grandson also joins the 27 Club.
And then what is it? Just like a couple years ago, Lisa Presley died?
Did she? I'm not that familiar with
Yeah, I think, I wonder if that was his mom.
Lisa Presley would have been Benjamin Keough's mom, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so he was Lisa Presley's son, I believe, yeah. Mm-hmm. And Elvis Presley's grandson, so.
Which I believe her death was due to substance abuse. I can't remember what exactly, but that she died from, and I wonder if a lot of that transpired from her son. Suicide.
Could be. If he died if he killed himself in 2020 and she died not that far afterwards, I imagine.
Right.
Imagine that doesn't help. Yeah. So
no, not at all.
Yeah. So how much do you, like, in your research and shows and stuff like that, get into like numerology? Because I used to kind of make fun of it and not think much of it, and over the years I've kind of realized that, you know, it's not only symbolism a language, but numbers are part of that symbolism, which is part of that language that's spoken in the occult. So I try to always include something about it.
Yeah, no, I do think there's certain numbers you see or certain patterns you see. I'm not always the best to spot it unless it's something blatant, like, you know, the number 33 in movies. Like, but there's people out there that do an excellent job in that research. I don't know if you're familiar with Robert Sullivan the Fifth. He does a lot of occult symbolism in movies and a lot of numbers, and he did on my show an excellent cover on covering the Aleister Crowley's Killing Curse, and with the Wizard of Oz, and the numbers, you know, he calls it the dark number 42, and how, you know, certain celebrity deaths are tied with this number, certain tragic events.
Right.
So, but he does really good at it and pointing these things out. But yeah, no, I definitely think there's patterns and numbers that are important to the occult. I mean, you talk about like 9/11 with Aleister Crowley. William Ramsey covers that very well. So, but yeah, I definitely think there's meaning in that.
I've definitely come to that conclusion over the years. Like I said, when I first got into this, I was like, people are talking about numbers and it sounded stupid. Yeah. But now I always look at it, and so I'm wondering, you know, obviously 27 is a number, so there has to be some importance in numerology if this is more than a pattern, a coincidental pattern, right? So the first thing that I looked at is, you know, 2 + 7 is 9, because that's how a lot of numerology works, right? And 9 is the last single digit. It represents the culmination of a cycle before the beginning of a new one. So that could go into the, you know, death and rebirth cycles and stuff like that. And there's a lot of directions you could take that, whether it's like, you know, kill this star off and then, you know, benefit off of their backtracks and then put another star in their place. I think that definitely happens in the rap game right now, where it's like, let's just like, these people are writing their own music anyway. I can't tell one mumble rapper from the next, but it seems to make them a lot of money to just recycle these people like every couple of years.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's also, go ahead.
9 seems to be an important number to the occult.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's a whole lot of reasons for it. There's also certain occult traditions that say 27 is a representation of a bridge between the material and the spiritual realm. So coming back to that crossroads and liminal place, like there's a connection between 27 and the crossroads and the liminal places.
That would make sense.
It's also linked to a sacrificial number, making a climactic moment in a cosmic or a personal cycle. And in a cosmic sense, it represents death and rebirth. Again, coming back to that Hecate crossroad symbolism, because it is the 27 lunar day cycle. So there's a lot of interesting, you know, I just kept noticing how much this comes back to the crossroads thing with Robert Johnson and that symbolism of 27.
Yeah, that's super interesting.
Yeah.
Those ties.
Yeah, there's alchemy too. They say 27 is a transition between base material and spiritual gold. So a lot of transition and crossroads stuff there as well. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off what you were saying, though.
Right. No, I just was agreeing with you. It seems to have some type of meaning behind it.
Mm-hmm. And the weirdest one to me is the idea of not just adding 2 + 7 and getting 9 or 27 by itself, but 27 is also considered the perfect cube in sacred geometry. So you've got 3 squared, the perfect cube, 27, 3, 3, 3. You got that symbolism right there. So 3, 3, 3, 3 squared, 27. You've also got, if you break it down into thirds, 9 + 9 + 9 is 27. 999 is obviously an upside down 666. So there's something interesting there. And what I find very interesting about the 666 symbolism, relating it back to 999, is I don't know how familiar you are with Juice WRLD.
I remember when it happened and, people covering it and everything.
So for people who don't know, Juice WRLD was this rapper. He died at the age of 21. He's not part of the 27 Club, but his symbol was the 999. It was, Juice WRLD 999, which obviously is a barely hidden 666. It's kind of impossible to not recognize that that's what is meant here, as much as people try to say, oh, he's flipping 666 on its head and it's actually a good thing. And it's like, I don't know, if I turn a pentagram upside down, it's still a pentagram, I'm not sure I'm buying that. But he had a song called Legends. And in this song, he literally says, what's the 27 Club? We ain't making it past 21. He then died at 21. So there's a lot of theory that the rap game is the 21 is the new 27 Club. And I couldn't even speak to it because there's so many, as I mentioned earlier, so many mumble rappers who are recycled by the time they're 21 that it's probably a longer list than the 27 Club at this point, but I just can't stand that. Yeah. Music.
No, I can't stand today's rap. I feel like it's talentless and it's not like, 80s, 90s, and, into the early 2000s. Like, it's all, like, very monotone and flat.
It's not only that, but, like, I pointed this out to, I've actually done this to a bunch of people where I'm like, okay, you like modern rap, pick your 3 favorite rap songs, and I will tell you exactly how the beat is going to go. And the lyrical rhythm is the same in every single one of them. And I'm like, oh, here's how it is. And then I'm like, okay, keep that in your head. Now listen to those 3 songs you named and it'll be the same. And I was right every time I've done this.
Wow.
Because it's the same song. It's just the same song. It's so color by numbers. It's insane, but a lot of people don't recognize it. Right. So I'll stop knocking mumble rappers for a minute, but
I'm okay with it. I completely agree. I'm not a fan of it.
No, I don't think anybody should be. But yeah, there's a couple of theories. I'll kind of end this with some of the theories on what the 27 Club means. So obviously the first one is the curse number, 9 + 9 + 9. The inverted 666 is just a curse number in and of itself. 27 is a curse number, and that's why it's some type of curse. Unrelated possibly to the Faustian bargain, which is kind of my theory. There's the Saturn return theory, which is interesting because it brings up Saturn. Saturn is Saturnalia. There's a whole lot of links there to Satanism and witchcraft and stuff like that. And obviously you got the black cube of Saturn and stuff like that. Astrologers claim, though, that the age 27 coincides with the Saturn return phenomena, which occurs approximately every 27 to 30 years when Saturn completes its orbit and returns to the same position in the sky as the time of a person's birth. So basically, the idea is that these creatives are born under the sign of Saturn, and that when it circles around and comes back, it's kind of like the completion of their life cycle. I'm not saying I buy it. I'm just bringing this one up. The claim goes on to say that Saturn intensifies life challenges and transformations and creativity, and it's some whole astrology thing. And I'm not really into astrology. I don't know if you are. I'm not really into it. I can't speak to it much.
A little bit. I can, do I buy into it? I don't know about that, but I do know a little bit about it.
But I don't mean to knock it as if it's not important. Like, I think that people think it's important, and it might have more importance than I think it does, but I don't know a lot about it.
I don't know about what the importance. I don't know. I think it's one of those fun things people like to look into.
Yeah.
Some people probably take it more seriously than others, but when you're talking about the numbers and curses, Robert Sullivan V does talk about the number 333, which you mentioned with the cubed being 27. He mentions there's a curse with a demon attachment. And he says it's a nasty curse tied to the demon Corazon, and his number is 333. I can't give you the specifics on Corazon, but it is interesting when you mention that.
Is that what the whole
that
angel
came to
numbers
mind,
thing is
so.
about? Because I see whenever I look into numerology, it's the idea of angel numbers, and it's always like, well,
don't
this
think-
angel's number is this, and it means this. And
Right.
is that like a fallen angel
So
thing
for
or a
him,
demon thing?
no, you'd have to ask him or maybe listen to some of the spots he covers because he covers so much. He didn't go into great detail, but it doesn't have to deal with angel numbers the way he discovered that number and its ties.
Gotcha. Yeah, the next theory that comes up, people talk about the 27-year genetic clock, which is this genetic predisposition that causes certain creative people to die at 27. So basically, the idea is that there is you know how women talk about their biological clock is ticking? It's like for creatives, their biological clock is ticking, and when they hit 27, it's like it's over for them. So they kind of tend to off themselves because they've just reached the all that they're ever going to do with their creativity.
Right.
Haunted year theory, 27 represents a spiritually significant liminal year, is the theory that individuals are more likely to attract dark energies, face their inner demons, or fall victim to malevolent forces. That's one theory. I don't know where some of these come from. I'm just kind of reading off what people are saying.
Right.
There's another theory that people posit called the emotional frequency resonance, which is that highly creative individuals vibrate a unique emotional and spiritual frequency that makes them more vulnerable to instability, addiction, and mental health issues. And that 27 is the frequency shift that leads to their collapse. I'm not super into the frequency stuff, so somebody else could probably speak to that more than I can. But
Brad might be.
Brad would be able to speak to that a lot more. He knows a lot more about that stuff than I do. I'm not even knocking it. I just don't know a lot about it.
No, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So
right.
But the weirdest theory that I came across that I wanted to bring up is this theory about Rh negative blood. Are you familiar with like the whole Rh negative stuff?
I am.
Okay, so roughly 15% of the global population has Rh negative blood. So there's A, B, O, but then there's plus or minus the rhesus, factor of your blood. And there is some actual biological discussions on where Rh negative blood even comes from. It seems to be that there was some type of genetic or evolutionary mutation that happened in the past that gives people certain advantages possibly, but it's weird. It doesn't seem to have occurred naturally. It seems like some type of mutation. So there's a lot of different theories on this, but conspiracy theorists have taken it into a different direction. I'm not even I think they could be right on a lot of stuff. Some of those suggest that it's either extraterrestrial origins, which is where you get the idea of like the star seeds, or you get the idea of the Anunnaki coming down, or what I would say being linked to the Nephilim, right? So you've got this idea that Rh negative blood has a link back to trace Nephilim crossbreeding, right?
Yep.
It's also, interestingly enough, Rh negative blood is most common in the world's elites. We're talking about royal families and things like that.
Yep.
So the royal families talk about how they have a link to an ancient bloodline that permits them to rule. It's a bloodline of the gods. Again, would make me think Nephilim. There is something there. And a lot of people have done some really deep research into this. But there are articles, and this one I find the most interesting because it's from rhesusnegative.net, that actually start to make the connection that there's a lot of people in the 27 Club who all have this in common. They all have O negative blood. So Kurt Cobain has O negative blood. So does Jimi Hendrix. So does Janis Joplin. So does Jim Morrison. And then what I find interesting is it ends with Amy Winehouse and doesn't say whether she does or not. So I started going down the list and trying to find, and all I could find is that the people who don't have O negative blood just don't have it listed. So I can't speak to the theory other than these main four. The main four. Yeah, Kurt Cobain, Janis Joplin, Jimi Hendrix, and Jimmy Page all have O negative, and everybody else is kind of a big question mark. So it could also just be linked to the idea that a lot of these celebrities are coming from these ancient family lines, and that's what's giving them their celebrity or whatever. But I found it interesting at the very least. I don't know how that fully ties into the 27 Club, but it is
fascinating.
It is interesting. So. But I don't know. What are your theories?
Extremely fascinating.
What are your thoughts on this? I mean, do you think that this is coincidence? It's just 27 is a difficult year for people, or?
I wouldn't say that. It seems like there's something weird going on. I don't think I can just chalk it up to coincidence. Although it does seem like getting later in years, and maybe it's like you said, you know, Juice WRLD said it's 21 now. I don't know. But it did seem like it was extremely prevalent for quite some time, especially for some really big celebrities or musicians mostly. So I almost wonder if it's like shifted to another number or something. Like, but I feel like something's going on with that number.
I find it interesting. I think that there's definitely a couple of things going on here. I agree that, you know, there's a burnout factor that happens at that age with people who have been very famous for a long time, especially with drugs. I don't discount that. What I did find interesting, and I lost this, or I'd pull it back up right now, is there was a chart of celebrities who died in their 20s. And, you know, it's like 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27. And it was a spike. Mm-hmm. It was a pretty significant spike at 27 and then back down at 28 and 29. A lot of musicians die in their 20s, obviously. The spike at 27 is interesting. It could have to do with all the things we mentioned. But I think that more than one thing can be true at once. And that's kind of where I come back to this, is like there are people on this list, like Kurt Cobain, who I think were sacrificed. At minimum, he was killed for, you know, so Courtney Love could benefit off him. Some people think he was a sacrifice. So Dave Grohl, who was a no-name drummer, like people didn't know who the drummer of Nirvana was exactly. But now he's, you know, the Foo Fighters. He's Dave Grohl, right?
Yes.
And so like there's a theory of that. The Jim Morrison in the bathtub is weird. So I think it's multiple things. I think that there's definitely Faustian bargains going on. And maybe 27 just happens to be a number where those souls get collected more often than at other ages. But when I looked into people who were very explicit with their Faustian bargains, people like J. Cole, people like Katy Perry, and a couple of others, I mean, they've lived past 27. So there's a lot of people who I started going that route. And the people who were the most obvious, in my opinion, selling their soul out were not dying at 27. So I don't think that Faustian bargain means that's your timeline. But I do think I think that's going on. I think that there's occult ritual sacrifice happening in this. So it's one of those lists that it's like, there might not be an answer to the entire 27 club. I think at least some of them are coincidental. But the idea that the occult number matters, that the perfect cube, the 666, things like that are important in the ritual sacrifice of some celebrities, I can buy that. I just don't think it explains all 85 people on the list. Right.
Exactly. Yeah, for sure. I do think it was extremely fascinating, though, the O negative that you brought up. That's super. It'd be interesting to know everyone else that.
I wish I could have found more names for it, but again, it was like I stopped looking after a while. I was like, I mean, how many people list their blood type on for the internet to know, and especially back in the 60s with these people, who knows? So.
Yes, right. No, I agree. It's probably a combination of things. And like you said, not everyone who's made a Faustian bargain has that. I mean, Bob Dylan's still kicking, so I knew he was anyways. There's
that new Bob Dylan movie coming out, isn't there?
Oh, I have no idea.
Yeah, Timothée Chalamet, I think, is playing Bob Dylan in a movie, so.
Oh, interesting. I wonder if they're going to put that part in there. Probably not.
Who knows?
Be interesting to find out.
All right, that was episode 5 of Dark Ocean. I hope you guys enjoyed learning about the 27 Club. And again, please don't forget to click the links in the description and go follow Nick's over at Stygian Charters as well. And remember, guys, the world is a dark ocean, and we're just swimming in it. I hope that this can shed some light. God bless.